The Big Story. You are listening to The Big Story.
Hello and welcome to The Big Story with Niti Central. In his Independence Day speech, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had said the 64-year-old Planning Commission would be soon replaced with a new institution to address the current economic challenges and strengthen the federal structure. He had invited ideas from the people on the new institution to replace the Planning Commission body. The website is mygov.nic.in, where you can actually put in your inputs. To give you an example, the Jan Dhan Yojana also came out from this. Two different meetings in the national capital happened to prepare the blueprint of the body. To talk about it, we have our guest today. He is the CEO of Niti Digital, Shashi Shekhar. Shashi, welcome to the program.
Hi, Danish.
Shashi, would you consider the current meeting which happened in Delhi that the Planning Commission will be restructured? And what about the 5-year plan which have been already put in place?
There's not a restructuring. I think there's a misconception there. I think the Prime Minister was very clear in his speech that he gave the example of a house, and he said that, it sometimes makes sense to renovate an old house, spend a lot of money, renovate it and make it look good. Or, it sometimes makes sense just to build a new house completely. And he was very explicit that when he's talking about replacing the Planning Commission, he's not talking of a cosmetic makeover. He's talking of a new entity, a new structure, new institution, and with a new responsibility. So that is where he's coming from.
Right.
So your question on the 5-year plans, will they still be relevant? They may not be relevant anymore because the whole centralized planning process itself has been called to question. That, so many decades after Nehru started this whole system of planning the economic growth of the country centrally and then setting targets for each sector. That whole thing has been called to question. And then there's a question of, how do you allocate funds to different states, how all of that can be done. So there are ideas on, what should be done because there are 3-4 different things that the Planning Commission was doing. And also remember, even the whole UID Aadhaar program was placed under the Planning Commission. So you had this entity, first of all, which was never, created by law. And then you had all these responsibilities that are given to it. So that needs to be addressed when we think of this new institution. So what are the things that the Planning Commission was doing earlier? How much of it is still relevant in this current context? And then who should do what? I think is probably these are the questions that need to be addressed.
Right. So the meeting which has taken place, the outcome, the reforms which are there. So the most important website which we have to see where public partnership is there is MyGov. So what actually comes out of it?
So there are 3-4 things that the Prime Minister has done. One is he asked people to give inputs on mygov.in. Also, he has engaged, different experts, and I think today they had a meeting as well, where former ministers like Yashwant Sinha, as well as the former RBI governor Bimal Jalan, and so on, different intellectuals were asked to brainstorm and come up with recommendations on, what this new institution should do and what should its role be. And then, of course, you had people writing different columns. We at Niti Central also have had, I think, at least 3 different articles on what should happen to the Planning Commission. Dr. Anant Nageshwaran wrote a long op-ed on, what he thought the new institution should do. And to him, it was all about decentralization, reforms, and so on. He even came up with a name for what this new entity should be. Then you had this podcast that was done with Dr. Saraf on why the Planning Commission should go and what should take its place. And then I had written an op-ed as well, where I had a slightly different take from Dr. Anand that the Planning Commission should be replaced by an entity. That takes a very holistic view of the challenges before the government.
So would you say
holistic view? It should cut across ministries, cut across departmental boundaries and so on.
So would it be a think tank? Would you call it
a think tank, but with a critical difference
Because I think, Shashi, you would agree to it. The problem with the think tank is that, there is a think tank, but when it comes to implementation of the ideas, that is where the problem comes. Even the, kind of schemes which are there by the center government, it's the state and center relationship which is the problem. You have your programs already, but when it comes to implementation, then it turns out to be a problem.
That is, in fact, I think what you have touched on is probably the overwhelming feedback on MyGov. If you actually go to the open forum that was created on MyGov for ideas to replace the Planning Commission, and you read through the comments that people have posted, I think the overwhelming feedback that comes from the majority of the people is that, all these plans are great, but, we never get down to execution. So this new entity should focus on execution and so on. So that's a very consistent theme. And I also noticed that the meeting that took place today, Yashwant Sinha also had a similar comment that the focus has to be on implementation and so on. Now, I don't know if that is such a great idea because ultimately I believe that execution should be left to the individual departments and ministries. Perhaps this entity could monitor progress and so on, but this should not be an implementation entity because the moment you bring in the implementation aspect, and it becomes a day-to-day, execution agency and not an agency that's thinking about innovation, thinking about problems, how to solve them.
Mm-hmm. Now, currently, if you look at it, we are in the 12th, current plan which is going on. And I was going through it that by 2017, there would be a review happening. Now, the mid-appraisal. Will this happen this year then? I mean, will it happen in 2017?
That whole process may become irrelevant going forward. The entire process itself may be changed based on what direction this new entity takes and who takes on the responsibilities of some of the work that the Planning Commission is doing in the past.
And what could be the...
There is talk, for example, that the Finance Ministry takes on certain responsibilities, and there's a Financial Commission that takes on certain responsibilities in terms of working with the states, and giving them more autonomy and how they spend their money and so on.
Right. And what about the reforms which would be in place after the institution comes up?
Yeah, I think one of the big areas that we'll probably see a lot of change is, the way states get to spend money. Because in the past you had to go to the Planning Commission, present your case, and then the Planning Commission would decide, how much money you got. I think that will change. I think that will be probably the biggest change that you'll see is in probably strengthening federalism, more autonomy to states, and a whole new mechanism by which states get to decide how to spend their money.
So, do you think that after this meeting, the blueprint would be completely laid out?
Well, that is the hope, because the Prime Minister, made this announcement on August 15th, and so the expectation would be that, very soon there would be consensus on what this new institution ought to look like, and a decision is announced.
And regarding the website, how much would be taken from the website itself, from MyGov?
Yeah, I think MyGov was an important test of where public opinion stands. And if you look at it, overwhelming opinion is that, with the preempts decision that, the Planning Commission needs to go. Many comments were around, this aspect of planning versus execution or implementation. And a lot of people wanted this commission to be about development and reforms. The phrase National Development Commission is something that you will see repeating in most of the comments. Now, there were some folks who also had some interesting ideas on how specifically this body should be constituted, what should its composition be, and so on. So I'm sure all of these inputs will be analyzed and presented before this panel of experts.
Anything which stood out? Anything which stood out for you?
Sorry?
I'm asking anything which stood out in front of you when you were reading the comments, when you thought, okay, these.
Yeah, I think what stood out to me was the overwhelming skepticism that plans are great, that we need execution. So what that told me was that the country was not really looking for rather think tank. The people really want execution or progress on all the plans that have already been made. And it sort of is a reflection on how we have as a country lagged on executing on projects, executing on changes. We have a long pending list. I think that backlog needs to be cleared.
Right. Shashi, on that note, I want to thank you for taking out the time and coming on to the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Big Story. You are listening to The Big Story.